think the NL West is the most interesting division to potentially talk about here, just because the biggest names in baseball went here.
And it got more interesting.
Pretty much in the last couple of days.
We had recorded a bunch of our division primers before, and then it came true that none of the things that we talked about, it didn't get blown up by something happened to the other 5 divisions where it's completely different than what we talked about.
Right. Well, and then the only big move that's really happened, in between the recording of the last one of these and this one is Dylan Cease moving over to the Padres, which is a big name coming over to the NL West, but it is not the biggest one.
No.
That belongs to one Shohei Ohtani and the Los Angeles Dodgers. And though we're not doing these in the order that we think these teams are going to finish in, it's difficult to start talking about the NL West with talking about anybody but the Dodgers, given what they did this offseason.
And I guess it's appropriate we start with first we mentioned the Padres and then the Dodgers because they will open the season so it's Thursday in Korea, but it's actually Wednesday night here in the U.S. when opening day, if you will.
And I think they're slated to be playing a Korean team in about 10 minutes from now, as of the recording of this podcast. So they're going to be playing some international games over there, which will be interesting as well. But when you look at this Los Angeles Dodgers, I think a lot of it begins and ends with you look at the top 3 of their lineup and go, oh, yeah, that's going to be a problem for most teams.
Well, and then so that basically says that Will Smith, he's just okay.
Right.
As your
Will
hitter.
Smith, who's one of the best catchers in baseball, is just okay. Max Muncy is just okay. I mean, Teoscar Hernandez, James Outman, just okay. They're just guys on the team.
Yeah, they fill it out with Jason Hayward, and then but the other thing is that Gavin Lux, who was the shortstop going into spring training, has been moved because I guess he had some yips on his throws.
The only thing I'm noticing here is I'm looking at our projected Dodgers lineup. Something happened with James Outman's statistics because they do not make sense.
That is true.
He is projected to hit a whopping 463 with 35 homers and an OPS of 14.
I think that would be an all-time season, and that is not going to happen. And these are projections that come from
he's also going to strike out 242 times.
So, I don't understand what that means. I don't think we need the stats that tell us about these guys.
I've noticed. But they are counting on guys like James Outman and Teoscar Hernandez to be big parts of this lineup because we saw what happened last year when it was the Mookie and Freddie Freeman show, and they didn't quite have the electric postseason that they needed from them. That lineup kind of just vanished.
Right, and the fact that Gavin Lux wasn't a part of it last year, his bat is thought to be so strong that despite the fact that they're going to have to move Mookie Betts and have him play shortstop, which we should talk about a little bit.
It's just wild that he's just like, he's just going to play short.
That Gavin Lux is, bat's valuable enough that they're going to move him over to second base where Mookie Betts was.
Mm-hmm.
And Lux was the shortstop of the future when they let Corey Seager go, but he's been injured and just not really the guy that they expected. They brought in Miguel Rojas last year, mainly to fill in,
right?
But he's still there.
Really wasn't a solution.
So it should be really interesting because wouldn't you say that playing shortstop puts a little more pressure on Betts on the defensive side, stress-wise?
Certainly, it is. It asks more of you than playing second.
Right. And so, look, this guy is, as I've said it before, a Hall of Famer in the making.
Right, the fact that now he's going to play shortstop is just adding to the fact. I think it actually makes him even more of a lock from Hall of Fame because very few guys are going to be able to point to their career and say, look, I was the best outfielder, second baseman, and potentially shortstop in my league during my career. There's nobody that can say that when you think about it.
And Mookie can't be feeling much stress because I think he started off spring training, he's batting like 420 or something like that.
The thing for Mookie is he knows he's going to see pitches all day.
Yeah, there's a guy.
Because there's a guy batting behind him named Shohei Ohtani. Now, who will not be pitching this year.
Yes.
He will be only batting, but that has to kind of be frightening if you're the other team going, an Ohtani that is literally only locked in about batting. That could be a scary prospect, especially because behind him is Freddie Freeman, so it's not like you could pitch around Ohtani, which you could do when he was on the Angels all the time.
So the only guy in the lineup that, you kind of say, okay, we can get through this guy is Jason Hayward, I would say, right?
Probably, but even then you expect, given the way the Dodgers normally roll, they'll make a move to go get an outfielder at the deadline to replace Hayward if they think they need it. But I think the thing that you're probably more worried about, if you're worried at all, as a Dodger fan. Because I think if you're a Dodger fan, playoffs are sort of a foregone conclusion for you. Your fears are postseason related, so the regular season, you are one of the few teams that has the privilege of the regular season being a sort of formality where, unless somehow we are all horrifically wrong or everybody gets hurt.
Well, that's the thing I think for their rotation is health, because you have, look at the guys they have that aren't going to pitch.
Right.
Let's talk about those guys.
These are guys that will not be pitching
until later. At least Kershaw might be later.
Kershaw is sometime in August. Dustin May after the All-Star break. Walker Buehler sometime in May, maybe. Tony Gonsolin 2025. Shohei 2025. Julio Urias.
Maybe never. And then James Paxton, who they brought in, is slated into the rotation, but he's still building up. He will not go to Korea with the team because he wasn't going to pitch or relieve. Right. So he's not even slated to pitch one of the games when they come back right away. I think Bobby Miller's going to get.
And now you're counting on Tyler Glasnow, who I believe is coming off. He's
been injured. He's looked great in spring.
And you have Yamamoto, who though he is unbelievably good, you have to be concerned about the fact that he's always played a shorter, less innings-heavy NBP schedule, and now he's going to be coming over to the major leagues. Can you really rely on this guy for more than 175, 180 innings?
I don't think he'll get that many.
Right, they've got him projected for 177, but that's what I'm saying. Will he even get that many? And if he is not, what are you going to get out of... What do you have after that? Bobby Miller, Gavin Stone, and a bunch of guys named Joe?
I mean, they like that's, by the way, our favorite expression. Somebody called us out because we say guys named Joe, so we have to find another guy.
A guy named Brian? I don't know, but it is a thing where I worry that's the one question, because when you look at their bullpen, they've got a bunch of guys in their bullpen. They don't have a top-end guy. Evan Phillips as their closer. I don't think you're going to call him a top end closer yet.
No.
That would be. It's a bit early to proclaim that, but they like him. And then you got Brutus Argatterall, you've got Joe Kelly, you've got Blake Trinan, you've got a bunch of guys that have had success in the past, but you don't have any of the top end guys. But you figure there's not going to be a lot of games ideally.
If you bludgeon everybody and it's 9-2 in the sixth inning,
right? What you need your bullpen to do is just be able to stretch out games, and your starter is just making sure to hold up for the first few innings. You're actually a team that's pretty well constructed to take advantage of short starter rotations, because all your starters got to do is lock them down for the first few innings, and you will probably score.
And the last I'll say on the starters will be that I guess they're hoping that, okay, so they'll patch it together, get it through till Kershaw comes back, then Dustin May comes back, and Buehler comes back. As you said, we don't think Urias is going to come back, although there's some talk about the fact that he hasn't been charged.
Who knows?
Who knows? But the point is those three guys could supplement what they're going to need later in the season.
And like we said with the outfield, they could always make a deal for a pitcher coming down the deadline. And their bench...
Well, they got Kiki Hernandez back.
They love Kiki.
And Chris Taylor is still there.
And Chris Taylor as a bench player is a lot more valuable than Chris Taylor as a starter, I think, especially now that he's a little bit older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, J.D. Martinez is listed here, but we know he's not a Dodger, nor will he be.
No.
Because he has nowhere to play, because they already got a guy to do what he does better.
Exactly. So I think for them, the Dodgers are thinking, if we need to use our bench more than sparingly, we're in trouble anyway. This is a team that's powered by the strength of their starting lineup. And as long as those guys stay healthy, we're going to see them in the postseason.
And, looking at the list of the guys on the bench that we mentioned, and there's some other names, I always know the Dodgers have some guys in the minor leagues and all that stuff that would probably be ready to step up who aren't even listed here.
Right, exactly. they always have guys in the minors that are ready to come up.
So then you've got the world champions who...
the World Series...
The World Series losers.
Representative.
My mistake. And they're talked about second because everybody looks at the Dodgers going, well, nobody's going to beat those guys. But the Diamondbacks, and I've said this a few times in this offseason, I really like what they did in the offseason.
Right. I think going out and getting Eugenio Suarez was a really good move to add some power to that lineup and take some pressure. You're not going into the season going to Gabby Moreno, okay, we need you to be that guy that you were in the postseason.
But they do.
They do. But if they're going to go back to the World Series and be a threat, they need that. But you're not putting that on him where, that was something I was kind of worried about with the Rays and Arozarena, where it's like coming off the back of a postseason run like that. It's a lot to suddenly have the entire franchise go, okay.
Play like that all
the time.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's not going to be relied on that, because you have guys like Jock Peterson you brought in. You have guys, you re-signed Lourdes Gurriel Jr. You brought in Eugenio Suarez. That's going to really help. And in addition to that, that's also going to help the fact that you can now play a guy like Alex Thomas for his defense, and it doesn't feel quite as bad because you don't have a bunch of other guys in the lineup that also kind of look like Alex Thomas.
I think Alex Thomas is a question mark for sure, right? He did well for them when they needed it most last year, but now over a full season, like you say, when he's going to be relied upon,
I'm sure there's a part of the Diamondbacks that would almost love if he was their fourth outfielder.
Yeah, he's not.
And he's not.
He's not. And of course, you've got Corbin Carroll coming back for his sophomore season. And
I feel like his projections are a little low. The fact that he only got projected for only 11 steals feels
Yeah,
wrong.
I don't think that's right either. I think he's going to
He stole a ton last
play
year.
great. And I think Ketel Marte has come on and become the
What we
player
kind of
we thought
expect-
he was going to be.
Right, and then you have guys like Christian Walker. You know what you're going to get.
You need
Christian
solid
Walker.
guys like Christian Walker on your
is going
on
to hit
winning
about 250.
teams.
He's going to hit about 30 homers. He's going to play Gold Glove defense at first base. You really can't ask for a lot more for what a team like the Diamondbacks is going to spend at first base. Because like when you look at Christian Walker, who are the obvious upgrades to him in the National League that you're going to be able to get? Maybe offensively, you'd look at like a Pete Alonso.
Yeah.
Right,
That's the first name that came to my mind.
Or you back up a truck to Pete Alonso to come play for the D-backs. Okay, I could see that.
But I think, in the Diamondbacks' progression, and we'll talk about the pitching in a second, they kind of overachieved last year. I think everyone would admit that to get to the World Series. And if they didn't win the division and they only made the playoffs and lost, would it really be that bad? Because this team doesn't feel finished to me.
No, I think the thing with them, though, is that you look at the starting rotation, and that's going to help them win a lot of ball games because they've got a deep starting rotation. They've got 5 guys that they can count out there to go out there and give them pretty good starts consistently. And not a lot of teams can boast that in the major leagues.
And my favorite deal they made in the offseason was for Eduardo Rodriguez, who I think has kind of gone under the radar almost through the major leagues.
I think he's sort of been stuck in purgatory on those bad Detroit teams for
After
years
being
now.
on a weird Red Sox team.
Right.
Yeah. And so Zach Gallen comes back as your number one and, had a great 3/4 of a season last year.
Definitely looked tired towards the end of the year.
But pitched pretty well in the World Series.
Right, he pitched well. You worry, though, that, guys, when they throw a ton of innings like that, they can tend to struggle the next year back. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Same with Merrill Kelly, who had a fabulous postseason.
Yep, and this is a guy I like to disparage who keeps telling me I'm wrong all the time.
Right, and, but the Diamondbacks are counting on him to be that guy that he was for them in the postseason. They don't need that every day during the regular season, but they need him to be a really strong number 2 for them because then that makes having the 3-punch of Eduardo Rodriguez really powerful bringing him over, especially because now he's going to be facing a lot of teams that haven't seen him that much.
Right. There's a part of me that thinks Eduardo Rodriguez could be the number 1.
At least by performance.
Right. And Brandon Pfaadt played very well in the playoffs last year, so I think they have a lot of high hopes that he's going to continue to do that.
Same for Ryan Nelson.
Ryan Nelson didn't pitch as much, but I think they're very high in
They use
him.
him more as a reliever.
Yeah. But like you said, that's a solid starting 5, and the bullpen is the same kind of.
It's pretty much the same. And they didn't lose that many guys. You bring back Paul Sewald. You still have Ginkel. You still got Miguel Castro. You've got Saul Frank and Ryan Thompson. You've got a solid top-to-bottom bullpen that maybe isn't the most dominant, but top-to-bottom, there's not a lot of bullpens that are, as deep as this one is, I feel like.
Don't you feel about Sewald, and obviously Met fans know Sewald because he was there for a while and just didn't pitch as well as he has since he left, and then kind of disparaged the Mets walking out the door or after he had walked out the door.
Them wrong.
But I don't know. Even in the playoffs, he's the guy that gave it up, at the end of the World Series, and I'm just not convinced that he is your de facto shutdown closer who will lock the game down. But he's been doing it for about a season and change now since he came from the Mariners.
Exactly.
So it would appear that I'm wrong. The bench, Jordan Lawler has been, the next coming for a lot of years.
I think if you're the D-backs, you're a lot happier that you've got guys like Evan Longoria and Jace Peterson as bench guys this year instead of guys that were regularly seeing the field like last year.
So wait, they have Jace and Jock Peterson finally?
Yes, they've got them unlocked both. They can combine into the ultimate Peterson.
Jake McCarthy comes back, and Longoria. I'm not really sure why he's back.
A veteran presence, I guess.
Yes, but he doesn't play very much, and if he plays a lot, it's not a good thing.
Right, but that's the thing; they don't need him to play much.
And Tucker Barnhart is one of the backup catchers.
Catcher.
I've always liked that player, so so I think it's nice to go deep there. Their Pavin Smith was solid for them, so their bench is good, and it was good last year. So do they have enough to beat the Dodgers? Obviously, the thing to say is we'll see. I don't think so, but we'll do
see.
our picks, in a week or so, and you'll hear that for sure. And so then who do we talk about next?
Well, we have to go to the team that made the biggest move, at least most recently, in the San Diego Padres, and they brought over Dylan Cease. And they're a team that I think, more than any other team, has the excuse of looking at last year and going, okay, we're just going to run this back. Because there was a lot of weird stuff with the Padres last season.
I completely agree. New manager, obviously.
Right, new manager. We talked a lot about this during our, This Week's in Baseball's last year, but the Padres were one of the worst one-run team games last year. They had they were one of the worst ninth-inning teams last year, and they were terrible at come-from-behind games. So when you have a weird variance like that, where they outscored their opponents by a ton, but they still lost a ton of games, that it's the kind of thing where there's just a lot of bad juju that seemed to be around that team last year, and I would not be surprised to just see them perform dramatically better this year, kind of like how I expect the Marlins to perform worse this year, just by the law of averages, that a team that was as good as the Marlins were in one-run games and a team as bad as the Padres were in run-run games will be a lot closer to at least 500 this season, because that's something that we have seen in baseball does change heavily year over year.
And Bob Melvin is out. He went to San Francisco to manage, and I think everybody thinks Bob Melvin's a good manager. The mojo wasn't there.
It wasn't. This wasn't the right.
Get rid of the manager because you can't fire all the players, and you bring in Mike Schilt, the former Cardinal manager, who inexplicably was let go there after he made the playoffs, and they had that streak of 17 in a row that one year.
It was bizarre.
And I don't know what Mike Schilt did wrong, and it certainly hasn't worked out.
Maybe
better
a Cardinal
for them
fan
since
out
he's
there
gone.
can kind of illuminate us, because I always heard that there was a little bit of a that the front office and Schilt didn't see eye to eye on certain things, including analytics, and that it was more like of a personality clash, and that they kind of looked at that 17-game win streak, from what I've heard, as more of our team. They were not a 17-game win streak, but we were a good team all along that was being held back by a manager.
Right.
And that 17-game win streak was just sort of like them playing the one good streak of play.
And even the fact that Soto is no longer a Padre, he's with the Yankees now, and we'll see what happens with his free agency after this season. That lineup
is still really good.
Really good, and I was going to say that I think the Padres have the chance, if their upside is all met like to 80 or 90% like these guys.
They could challenge the Dodgers.
Right. If Xander Bogaerts becomes the guy we thought he was, because he didn't have a very good season, although it wasn't as bad last year as I thought.
But it wasn't what they were hoping for when they paid Xander Bogaerts.
All that money, and they're still paying him all that money. Tatis Jr., I think he had an excellent season last year.
He really did.
Underrated.
Underrated.
Now he's become a Gold Glove right fielder. Jake Cronenworth, this is a guy who continually, kind of shows up and delivers stats, and you just don't really think that much about him.
Right. He's going to play well. He's going to give them quality at bats, and especially now that you're able to get Manny Machado a little bit more into his role as a DH.
He's going to play third mostly.
He's going to still play third mostly, but now that you could at least get him to DH now, that's going to preserve him because the guy can still hit.
Right. Ha-Sung Kim signed the big deal.
He had an unbelievably good last year.
He's going to play shortstop, and he was a Gold Glove last year.
Had I think the highest shortstop WAR in the National League, or he was second to Lindor. They were 1 and 2 all season.
And then the last two spots in the lineup, Luis Campusano, that's at catcher. Look, the Padres haven't gotten any offensive contributions from a catcher.
Only 5 teams in baseball can have a top 5 catcher. And I know that's a weird way to put it, but I think it's something that we do kind of forget, that there's only so many good catchers that can go around. So we can't really knock teams for not having as long as they have a good enough catcher. I'm not really going to care that a team's catcher is not like, oh, well, he's not a Will Smith or a JT Realmuto.
There probably are more than 5, really good catchers, but you're right to say that, if you want to say you've got a top 5 catcher, it's a limited pool.
Interestingly enough, actually, we were watching the MLB Network last night, and they were doing the top 10 catchers, and there are a lot of very good catchers in baseball, but that's just always a position I'm willing to forgive a team for not having this. It's like
the offensive
for
guy
me,
back
it's kind of like it's morphed out at the shortstop. We used to be okay with your shortstop being like a 180 hitter if he was a good enough fielder. I'm kind of good with whatever my catcher is giving me, and if he's good offensively, that's like a bonus.
But that will all change. I have said this.
With automatic balls and strikes.
ABS is going to change. The catcher's offensive contribution is going to have to go up.
All that's going to matter is
framing isn't going to mean a thing.
All that's going to matter is your ability to throw out guys and block the ball.
They brought back just recently Jurickson Profar, and I guess he's going to play. He's just a guy who's been there, on and off. And just flipping over to the bench, they got Kyle Higashioka backing up a catcher. Okay.
I don't think Yankee fans aren't going to tell you.
Oscar Mercado, Jose Azocar. Their bench is a little thin.
Right, and they've traded away some of the young guys that they just brought in for Dylan Cease, but that's given them a rotation that I think the Padres say we feel good about this season.
If they can stay healthy like all rotations, because at the top of the rotation still kind of, sort of, is Darvish.
But Darvish, Musgrove, and Cease are all guys that tend to get a little nicked up throughout the course of a season. Michael King
was a reliever,
now is going to be a full-time starter, and he's got the stuff, but you still have to question what it's going to be like making that transition and throwing. Even if he throws a comparable, he's obviously going to throw more innings, but he's going to be throwing a lot more innings on a consistent basis. That's going to be a lot of stress on his arm.
And Johnny Brito is the other projected starter. I don't know much about Brito. I know he had some decent starts last year, but they're counting on him.
But they're counting
on him for 25 to 30 starts.
Right, because that would be something that you would look at this. The Padres would say, hold up, almost Cooperstown. We have just as good a rotation in this division as the Diamondbacks do. We might even be better with our top end, because you might argue that the 3 top end of the Padres is better than the top end of the Diamondbacks.
Yeah. Well, certainly they've had more experience in big games.
And Robert Suarez was a good closer for them last year. They also have Steven Wilson, who I think is going to kind of split duties with him.
And then they inexplicably paid Wandy Peralta $4 million a year. Remember the Mets were looking at Wandy Peralta?
I'm glad they stopped.
And I was like, $4 million for Wandy Peralta to pitch like every 5 days or something like that? That's a big contract. But anyway, they believe in him. His stats look good for the Yankees last year, so they believe it'll translate coming over to the National League. Eniel De Los Santos also is a really good pitcher that nobody really knows about. I don't know who Yuki Matsui is, much about Yuki Matsui. I think he was a pretty good reliever in Japan coming over here. So I think their bullpen is pretty solid. They just need a different vibe this year, and they need to come out and probably need to win one of the 2 games against the Dodgers in Korea.
It's the kind of thing where if they come out hot out of the gate, that's a team that could go off to the races and have an unbelievable season.
And on the other hand, a lot of people are projecting the Giants and to be very good this year. And I look at the team and I'm like,
they feel like the island of misfit toys.
Yeah, they're big moves. Obviously, bringing in the free agent Korean player.
Yeah, Jung Hoo Lee is obviously they're expecting,
and Matt Chapman.
Right, they're expecting a lot out of those guys. They're expecting a lot out of a newly signed Jorge Soler.
Right, that's another guy they brought in. So, those are 3 big acquisitions. So you can't say they sat on their hands, but it doesn't feel like they got the guy they wanted, right? They were in the Yamamoto sweepstakes.
Right, it's been a couple of years of that, and you're counting on having some big seasons from, you've got Thairo Estrada and Lamont Wade, who are sort of their homegrown guys, manning the right side of the infield at second and first, respectively. But they've got Nick Ahmed as their shortstop.
Yeah, and he played his entire career. He played like 12 years for Arizona.
Right.
And the reason they let him go is he couldn't hit.
Right, and now you've brought him in as the D-backs, and Patrick Bailey is your catcher.
Well, Bailey had some nice...
But they're pining for the days of Buster Posey.
Yeah. Mike Yastrzemski comes back, and he'll play left field, I guess, again for them. And Michael Conforto, the former Met, it comes back, and he had a season last year, I guess. One guy who isn't coming back for them, and a really weird thing happened when I was looking into... Mets DH options, right? They're talking to J.D. Martinez, is that J.D. Davis had won his arbitration case against the Giants for like $6.9 million. Mm-hmm. And there's a clause in there that allows the Giants within a certain amount of time to buy out that winning
so they
thing
bought him out
for $1,100,000, and they cut him.
Oof.
So he's gone. He doesn't have a job. He
just got signed.
Who signed? Oh, right. He got signed just last night, right?
Right. He got signed last night by the Athletics, I think.
I think you're right. He did. The A's signed him. Good for him.
Right.
They could use a guy like JD.
I think one of the big things is a guy that was I think they were leading hitter last season, and Wilmer Flores is now relegated back to bench duty, which is as a Met fan, as much as I love
He
Wilmer,
was their leading player by WAR last year.
It's a good thing when Wilmer Flores is your best bench player. That's a great place to be.
And I would say that the Giants, it's about the pitching because they might have one of the most unheralded great starters in baseball in Logan Webb.
Right. People don't realize how good Logan Webb is, and he's been unbelievable, and they're counting on him to be unbelievable this year.
They also went out and signed Robbie Ray, which we should not be forgotten, even though
now
he's injured right now.
Injured.
So he's not going to start the season pitching for them. But having Logan Webb and Robbie Ray at the top of the rotation,
that's a nice 1-2 punch.
Means you probably don't have to score quite as many runs, as you might.
And you've got the Rogers brothers in the bullpen, and Tyler and Taylor, and they're going to be setting up for Camilo Doval, who has been a solid closer for them for the last couple of seasons.
Right, and Jordan Hicks is going to start for the Giants. Kyle Harrison comes back, and I think they're expecting a lot from him. And Keaton Wynn, and Alex Cobb will probably pitch while Ray is injured.
Right, the less Alex Cobb pitches, probably the better.
But it's good to have a guy like that around who understands what it's like to take the ball.
Right, he understands what it's like to take the ball every 5 to 6 days. It's just, when you look at the Diamondbacks, my problem for them is, if they were...
These are the Giants.
The Giants, I'm sorry. If you look at if we put them in the NL Central, I might feel okay about their chances. If you put them in maybe even the NL East, I could see them squeaking out.
Being a pain in the neck.
Right, being a pain in the neck, squeaking out a wild card spot. I just see 3 teams in this NL West that, unless one of them really stumbles and the Giants play well, it's a 2-step process, not just like, oh, the Giants have to play well and they can catch these other teams. I think they need one of the Dodgers, the D-backs, and the Padres to play badly for them to try and overtake them. And that would still just to be to probably challenge for a wild card spot. So,
that's the best I would say.
Right.
But.
I just can't see them having another weird miracle 100-plus win season like they did.
100 wins, no. I think the Giants will be happy at 90.
Right.
And then we bring up the rear of the NL West.
The moribund Colorado Rockies.
And Charlie Blackmon comes back for his 73rd season. His beard
Now
looks
like
his beard looks like he might have been there for 73 years.
I feel like every season he tries to get lost in the Colorado wilderness, and they just drag him out of like the Rockies and force him to play baseball again, and that's why he looks like that every year.
I looked at Blackman's career stats, and I was trying to come up with some case that maybe he's like a Hall of Famer.
You don't need to do that for everybody.
No, he's not. By the way,
he's exactly. I think
just a good major league hitter.
I appreciate that you want to make sure everybody gets their due, but sometimes you're like, let's make a case for this guy, and it's just like really this guy.
And he plays in Colorado, which sort of devalues a little bit.
He's still going to go out. He's going to give you quality at bats out of the leadoff spot. It's just who's he doing it for?
Well, and right, because having Chris Bryant or the ghost of Chris Bryant,
right? The shell of Chris Bryant.
How can you go to Colorado and be worse?
Well, I think if you were a guy that
as a hitter,
it's got to be a tough environment to play in Colorado.
I mean, the ball goes far when you hit it over the fence and stuff like that, or in the gap.
It's got to be hard to be a player to keep up your craft in Colorado when you almost feel removed from the competitive ecosystem of baseball. You're not a competitive team. Your opponents know you're not a competitive team. Your fans know you're not a competitive team. So how do you keep up the motivation to work hard and hone your craft every day when it doesn't matter?
It sounds like you're talking about the Oakland A's.
Yeah, that too. They're kind of in the same position.
So, Nolan Jones is back for the Rockies.
They love his bat. I mean, he hit some titanic home runs last season.
Brendan Rodgers, a player I like and a pretty decent second baseman.
Brian McMahon, who's done a pretty good job filling the massive hole left by Nolan Arenado over at third. Elias
Diaz, who I think we had him on our fantasy team a few years ago, so I kind of like this player because he's got more pop at catcher than a lot of guys. Had a good streak last year. Sean Bouchard in the outfield. Ezquiel Tovar, I don't know him as their shortstop. And I think former Gold Glove winner Brenton Doyle.
That is correct. Gold Glove winner. People don't realize that about him.
In the outfield for the Rockies. And it's good to have a Gold Glove fielder in Colorado, by the way.
There's
a lot of ground to cover out there, and ball go far over there.
I think it's certainly telling that, you've got a lineup here in Colorado of a team that plays 81 games there. They don't have a projected guy in their lineup that hits 300.
Or 30 home runs for that matter.
Right.
And I think that's the thing about the Rockies is I think if you're the Rockies, you already know that pitching there is always going to be difficult. Why don't you just try and go all in and collect a team of guys that can mash and give up on the pitching because it ain't going to work. Right. No one wants to go there.
The problem is you need to build a team that's really good on defense and can mash. You need to be a plus defensive team so that you can help your pitchers out as much as you can by stealing away outs.
I'd argue that, and I'd argue that the 5 starters for the Padres, Kyle Freeland,
who they really like, and it's just like he's going to be a pitcher in Colorado, so he's going to be projected with a 4+ ERA because he's going to pitch in Colorado.
right? But could you, if he pitched for virtually any other team, where would you slot him in a rotation?
He'd probably be a 2 to a 3 for most other
You're
teams.
higher on him than I am.
Depending on the team.
And maybe that's just because I'm prejudiced because I see the stats in Colorado. And it's hard to ignore them, even though they're bad for everybody.
But then you also get past that, and you're looking at Cal Quantrill and Austin
Gomber
and Ryan Feltner and Dakota Hudson. I mean, you've got guys that are okay.
They're kind of like been around.
Right, you know what you're roughly going to get for them. They probably got a better contract to come pitch here in Colorado than they would have.
Because nobody wants to pitch there.
Right.
Yeah. And then the bullpen. And talk about the worst job in baseball is being a bullpen guy, particularly a closer in Colorado, because it's just a home run waiting to happen a lot of the time.
One mistake.
And Daniel Bard has shown that over the years, and he's back again. Another guy he's got to be pushing 40.
I mean, they got guys out here, Justin Lawrence and Tyler Kinley and Jake Bird. I mean, they don't have anybody in this bullpen.
Nick Mears, I know his name.
Fearing or being like, oh man, I don't want to face him. And I think it's just got to be tough being a Rocky fan right now because what are you're probably getting behind the idea of, well, what is Nolan Jones? That's probably what you're hoping to, as a Rocky.
Can we have one player emerge?
Right, and like, okay, we've got a special outfielder here in Nolan Jones, and that's something we can try and build around, and then hopefully we can get rid of the owners and actually have a competitive team at some point.
Well, our friend Mark Stevens, who we had on there, who lives in Denver, is a big Rocky fan. Just basically said that the city has kind of given up on the Rockies because they've done the fan base wrong, and I think he's right.
They're heading the best thing that they have is that Colorado is a more populated city, and it's a very popular tourist destination than where the athletic stadium is right now. So you're going to get a lot of just neutral fans coming in to watch Rocky games. But they're heading down a similar path of just people not showing up because people don't want to watch a non-competitive product.
I was in Denver a week or so ago and drove past Coors Field a number of times. It looks real pretty. They're getting it all ready for opening day.
It's an unbelievable place to watch a ball game. Except if you're a Rockies fan, because then you're watching Rockies baseball.
And let's just talk about the bench, because I want to see, do you know any of the players on the Rocky bench? Elihuris, I love that name. Elihuris Montero, I don't know him. Hunter Goodman. Sam Hilliard, I know Sam Hilliard for some reason.
I don't know him.
Jacob Stallings.
I've heard of Jacob Stallings.
Catcher, a backup catcher.
Because he was a Miami Marlin backup catcher
That's
for a
correct.
while.
Alan Trejo, Michael Togla, Julio Carreras, Bradley Zimmer. I think I know Bradley
I want to
Zimmer
say I've
for
heard
some
the
reason.
name, but like that's just also a baseball-y name, so like it could just be.
So they're not likely to get a lot of help from the bench, and they've had good draft picks because they've had bad teams for a bunch of years.
But they never seem to find a guy.
Right. They never seem to find. I just don't think they decide what they are. When the Rockies have been good, they've been a team that would just bludgeon you, and the pitching was good enough.
Exactly. You're never going to be a team with a top flight rotation because the only chance you ever have of that is somehow miraculously raising 5 rookies simultaneously that are all elite pitchers. So get a bunch of starters that are good enough. Build a lineup that hits the cover off the baseball and plays unbelievable defense, and maybe then you can get somewhere other than the basement of the NL.
That's not going to happen this year.
No.
And I would say that the Rockies will be the chaff for the other 4 teams in the division. They've got 13 games against each of those other teams. So that's 52 games. How many of those 52 games against the Giants, Padres, Diamondbacks, and Dodgers are they going to lose?
Not many.
Yeah.
But I think the ultimate thing to think about is, we got baseballs on Tuesday.
That's right. Opening day.